So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm here with Karadimov, a relative of mine who's been very inspirational to a lot of stuff that I do, especially this podcast. Why don't you go ahead and give the viewers a little introduction of who you are?
Oh boy, yeah, well, we were just talking about this, like defining ourselves. It's a lifelong pursuit. So my name is Karadimov. I was born in the Ukraine and I moved to the US in 1989. Grew up in New York. Was a military brat for a while. Lived all over the country. Lived in Washington State, Rhode Island. Went to college in New Jersey. Lived in LA for 13 years. Now in Austin, Texas, with my wife and 2 kids. And I've been an entrepreneur, self-employed since 2011. And what else? Love art, obsessed with music, always listening to music. On a big health kick right now, having like a revival around my health, which has been awesome. And, technology, just really enjoy staying on the cutting edge of technology and really stretching the boundaries of like human potential and leveraging technology as like a medium in accomplishing that. And probably elaborate on all the other things as we go.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey everyone, before we continue the segment, don't forget to subscribe, like, dislike, leave a positive comment, leave a negative comment. I don't care. Thanks for watching, and now on to the program. I mentioned the typical, first question I ask everyone that I have on is, give me either your defining moment or a defining trait that, you can give credit to as to, why and how you got to this point in your life.
Yeah, that's a great question. There's been a lot of things, that have been defining, but I would say if there was one core thing, it was like the passing of my grandmother when I was younger. I think why? Because it just was really like foundational. She was like the matriarch of our family when we were moving to this country, and I felt like she was like really the glue that kept my family together, and was a very loving person, and really just made an impact on my life. A lot of my family did, but like my grandma just had like a special place. So I think when she passed, it really like changed my family and me as a young person coming up. And as someone that already felt like I was like an outlier and I was meant for more, it just kind of created a spark in me that was like, okay, like I got to take the reins. Like I was like the torchbearer, is what it felt like at the time. And then since then, I've been like molding myself into someone that can like be worthy of that and, embody her and the values that she brought even at that age. And, I have like a tattoo that I got at 27 that reminds me of her and like the sacrifices that my family made when they came to this country. And I think it really made me appreciate life even more so, like appreciating every moment, that tomorrow's not promised, a lot of these things that, motivate me to act in the moment, to act upon the things that I want to do. And, just really max out every day, make people feel appreciated, and bring my all to every moment and every day.
Would you say the passions that you hold today are passions that you have held while even before your grandmother had passed, and was her passing the defining moment that made you essentially just kind of tackle life head on? Would you say that, you've had all the passions that you mentioned, art, music, tech, were all those already inside of you passionately?
No, I think, what I could say with certainty that I had was the feeling that I was different. And I know a lot of people feel different, but I really felt like I was meant to accomplish big things. Like I felt like an outlier even within my family, not in a negative sense, but like in a positive sense. Like I felt special, and that I had like a spark or something that made me unique. So and then the interests were things that I picked up on as I went. Like I could tell you, just like like I shared earlier, that was like very integral, but then there were other defining moments that happened along the way. So like the technology piece, that was like when I was choosing colleges, I could have gone to an art school in Washington State or go to this technology school in New Jersey, and my family really pushed me to go to that school, and that really spurned my interest in technology, because it was a tech school, and through that I started learning like graphic design, web development, and that kind of set me on this path with technology. But I was always kind of curious about it, like since the days of like AOL and dial-up internet. I was just like, what is this? And then I remember like when I first started understanding what a website was, I was like obsessed. I like went to my local like community center and was like tinkering with websites, and I was just blown away by the fact that somebody could like make something that lives online that anybody in the world has access to. So, I think that there was always this buildup of technology interest. Music, my dad exposed me to a lot of music when I was younger, which I feel very fortunate that he just, I got exposed to such a variety of music, and it's really just made me like appreciate a lot of different mediums and not just like one format. And so, yeah, I think, there were just kind of foundational things that were there, like in terms of like how I kind of see myself, but then the hobbies and interests kind of developed from there, which even the technology thing, if I kind of trace it even further back, like when we first came to this country, I got a Nintendo, and I was just like, hell yes, so like I think the technology thing was there from early on, but certainly I couldn't have imagined that it would have evolved to where it is today.
Nice. Yeah, no, that's great story, great background regarding, just how we develop passions and, where we, take ourselves when we are interested in things. When it comes to, being, what like the individual that you are, the entrepreneur, when it comes to, just people going out there and trying to be that, what was like the first thing that you realized, having started the experience of entrepreneurship that, kind of was just the biggest wow, to you, like I was not expecting that?
That's a great question. Well, I'll give some background as to like how I got into entrepreneurship, and then I'll try to recall, some key moments in that. Because I knew when I was in college, and I started getting exposed to the corporate world, I like quickly knew that 9-to-5 model didn't feel right for me, especially like when I graduated college and I had my first like full-on 9-to-5 job. So when I graduated college, I actually had like a really cush setup. Like I was very fortunate. I was able to get a job fairly quickly, and it was a well-paying job at the time. I was working off of Wall Street. Like most people in that area, that was like the dream job.
Yeah.
But I already knew that format wasn't going to be conducive for me, because I was doing a lot of like entry-level data entry work. Like it wasn't very fulfilling. It felt very monotonous, and just the 9-to-5 structure just felt so kind of inhibiting. Coupled with like commuting an hour each way, I was spending the bulk of my day on work, and then when I would come home, I was depleted, and and then I would be just kind of like agitated around my family, and I was like, this doesn't feel right, So I knew even then that format wasn't going to work for me long term, because I did see myself as someone that was going to have kids, and work-life balance was important, and I wanted to be around for them, and like that structure wasn't going to be conducive for that. So I already kind of knew that there had to be a different way. And when I moved to California, I started working with startups, and I really loved that. It was a lot more flexible, it was a more flexible time commitment. I can work when I was like passionate and inspired, and then like when I needed downtime, it was available to me. and I was working more with the arts rather than like, logical data entry type work, which also appealed to me more. And so like I was like, okay, there's a lot more here that I like, even if I'm not making as much money. That's not necessarily what's most important to me. Like I would rather be doing something that's fulfilling and impactful. So over time I realized that impact was a higher driver for me than like necessarily money or some of the other creature comforts that come from a job. So I wanted to do impactful work. And so it wasn't, and then it wasn't long after that I made that transition from like working for someone to working for myself. And I was very fortunate that I had mentors along the way that really kind of like lit the fire under my ass to make that leap. Because it was a big leap of faith to go from, this structure that everybody in my family was like, this is the way, the 9 to 5, to, becoming an entrepreneur. And one mentor in particular, when I was doing self-development work at the time, she really challenged me on that. She's like, you haven't been feeling fulfilled in this model for a long time. Like, when are you going to actually go and do the thing? And I was like, she's right, And so she was really integral in bridging that gap and taking that leap. And so yeah, 2011, I started my own business, and there were definitely a lot of like hurdles along the way, but I couldn't have imagined that I would be where I am today, and like who I am today is like a culmination of all the experiences that I've had since then. So yeah, I think I kind of addressed the question.
I mean, it is crazy just how embedded that 9 to 5 is, in all of us. I mean, I'm still, technically working it, even though, I have, arguably, the best gig I've had throughout my career so far. It's been, I've been thankful, and I, have been doing my best to try and, seize these moments as much as possible, because one day, like, I could lose my current job that would then force me to have to, like, change directions for, I don't know how long. But I mean, yeah, like, I also have, started thinking more about, more autonomy over myself, not working for the man. I, hopefully sooner than later will be on the path to gaining credibility to then take over my father's company. So I won't have to, I'll be doing work I know couldn't possibly, like, vanish. I know it'll always be in demand. I'll be, I won't have to worry about answering to anyone. And it definitely is, it is it gives me an anxiety sort of feeling still, even though, like, someone from the outside might look at me and be like, oh, he has like everything set up for him. But really, like, if I did, I would be already on that path. But I'm still a little hesitant, just because, like, maybe I've gotten a little too comfortable, or maybe I'm, trying to, get a better like a full understanding of what it's like to be, an entrepreneur and, own my own business and so on and so forth. What was the first business that you owned, that you opened up yourself in 2011?
Well, I'll just say firstly, I totally understand where you're coming from, so I'll just want to touch on a few things there. I mean, because I think it's really important, and it's very, like, timely with, where we are as a society. Because, I don't know if the viewers know, like, your dad runs like an electrical company, right? And, which in all intents and purposes is very secure right now, because, we are moving more and more into like a tech, focused society, and technology is going to take away a lot of, like, the routine work that people have come to know and do. And, in my opinion, well, not in my opinion, a lot of people's opinions, trades are going to continue to increase in value, because there's going to be less and less people that know how to do stuff like that. So your dad actually, did set you on a really great path. So I totally understand, there might be anxiety around, like, your ability to hold that and do that work, and, being an entrepreneur, whether you want to do that or not, those are all very relevant. But that model is as secure as it can be, right? As secure as it can get right now. So that's a positive about that trajectory that you're on. And then, so when I made that that bridge. So backtrack a little bit. When I mentioned that I was working at those startups in California, I was very fortunate that I worked with a company at the time. It was called College Battle. It's now known as like Campus, Camp VS, and they're really, it's crazy how much they've grown since then. But I came in as like a graphic designer, web designer at the time, because as I mentioned, I was already kind of getting into those things when I was in college, and I really got to grow fast. That was like the benefit of working at a startup, was that there was a lot of like creative freedom to grow, and my boss at the time was like really great at enabling me and giving me a lot of creative freedom to grow and take on new responsibilities and things. So I really kind of, I started becoming this kind of like social media manager, marketing manager, kind of brand strategist. I was putting on live events and seeking out venues and artists. So we were basically like American Idol for college musicians, which was a really cool, what a great first gig, right?
Yeah,
like coming
absolutely.
out of college, that was like polar opposites of what I was doing in Wall Street. And so there were a lot of things that I loved, and so I brought that into my business. I'm like, okay, like I like this like agency sort of model. I like this like creative, agency, kind of like where I can use my brain, I could use my creative, creative like problem solving skills to create solutions for small to medium businesses. Because I also liked the small to medium businesses. I started realizing that I didn't like corporate. It was way too like stuffy for me, but I liked, again, that the autonomy and the agency, no pun intended, of working with those smaller businesses that were like willing to make mistakes, willing to move fast, like try different things. And so that that really kind of, I brought all that with me into the agency work. And funny enough, I mean, it's taken a lot of different permutations, and I've tried a lot of different stuff over the years, but that agency model has really been at the core of what I've done for the last like 2 decades. And so, it's very apt that we're meeting now, because I'm releasing like, the current iteration of what I've been doing is called Aivvy, and I'm about to release Aivvy 2.0, and it's really a culmination of everything, like those kind of foundational things, but then all the trials and tribulations along the way, and the things that I've learned from the clients that I do like and the clients that I don't like, and how I like to work, and what's the highest use of my time, and what are things that I absolutely don't want to be doing that I need to either delegate to like AI or other, or like consultants, or just take it off my plate. So hopefully, I know that I had to cut a little more there, but that was kind of where things started.
Nice. No, that was great. Aivvy, tell us about it.
Yeah,
give
man.
us the whole spiel.
Oh boy. It's really exciting. So like I said, I've always kind of done this agency model, and in like about 1.5 years ago. So when we were moving from LA to Austin, I intentionally kind of stepped back from like doing entrepreneurship, because we also had 2 kids in the process, and the move itself from LA to Austin was very taxing, because I had to sell our house there, build a new house here, rebuild my network here, make sure that my wife and kids were like positioned to win. Like my oldest had to, he was starting school, so there was a lot of like transition in the last 5 years, and that's the beauty of who I've developed myself to be, is I could afford to step back and be like, okay, like I'm gonna like really prioritize my family in this move, and like these foundational pieces that we need to succeed in the long term. And about 1.5 years ago, I was like, okay, like my capacity to focus back on my business is returning. And so like about 1.5 years ago, I was like, okay, and the other thing that was happening at that time was like, AI was coming on the scene. Like AI as we know it now. Obviously we've been doing AI for a long time, but it's like, the movement of AI kind of really started emerging, and I was like, okay, like I want to jump on this train early, and I want to build something that is like a solution for the people that are going to be overwhelmed with the idea of AI. Like, they're going to want someone that understands it and is working with it actively and is leveraging it in their business and can like be a solution for supporting wherever they are in their business with AI and the latest technologies and things. So even the name Aivvy kind of was like an evolution of that. Like, it has AI in the name.
Okay.
And even that, I was like brainstorming with AI, all the different names, and I was going through countless names, and I was like, Aivvy, like, I love it because not only does it have AI in the name, but it's got this good balance of kind of like masculine and feminine. Because I'm a big branding guy. So for me, like, how something makes you feel is really important. And, so I'm not going to go into too much detail. I don't want to reveal too much behind the curtain, but even the name was very intentional at the time. And when I was looking it up, I'm like, okay, let me see if there's any other companies that are called Aivvy out there. And funny enough, 15, 20 years ago, there was a company called Aivvy, but they were producing like equipment, like audio equipment, so but they became defunct. So basically they went out of business, and I was like, okay, like, I have legal claim to this. Like, they're no longer operational. They've been out of business for over 10 years. And so I acquired Aivvy.co because Aivvy.com was still owned by them. And going off on a tangent, but we'll get there. So I launched it. The crazy thing is I built that entire business in like 2 to 3 months. So like the website, the back end, the pricing model, and then I got right into it. I started marketing it, and I was taking a 90% done approach, which is a lot of like the philosophy that I bring to the business. Rather than trying to make things perfect, I've just learned that to get things 90% done and to release it, and you could always iterate on it later. So that was the goal, and we did it, and it's been very successful, and I've learned a lot even in the last year and a half. And what we're about to release truly feels like a 2.0 in that, like, it's going to feel distinctly different even from where it was a year and a half ago. And in the process, we actually acquired Aivvy.com. So this is what's been interesting. A lot of people don't know is that I actually ended up bidding on Aivvy.com because it became available. They basically they lapsed on their ownership over it, and it went into auction, and I actually bid on it until I won it, and now I properly own Aivvy.com, which was a huge strategic move because it's in my possession now. I'm moving everything over to Aivvy.com, including our email addresses and whatnot. But now, I have even more claim to the name. In down the line, if I want to, let's say, acquire the Facebook page or anything like that, I'm going to have more claim to that and be the sole Aivvy on the market. So there's a lot of stuff that I'm doing behind the scenes that people don't even see, and to me, those are the things that I enjoy doing. To me, it's like real estate. I have a piece of real estate that is mine, and there is even a market for domain ownership, So I don't want to go off on too many tangents and blow people's minds, but it's a little bit of behind the scenes, a peek behind the curtain of what's been going on, and I'm really excited about this iteration that's coming out now.
Nice. Yeah, no, I'm excited, for you, and I'm excited to see where it goes. You mentioned at the beginning, obviously, going through this health journey and whatnot. How does that, I'm obviously one, me, I'm a big health guy and whatnot. Mm-hmm. How much has, this health journey helped you in, being an entrepreneur and, making Aivvy and, just life in general,
That's a great question. And there is a direct correlation, for sure, because you and I have talked behind the scenes, December of last year, I had a real, I wouldn't call it a midlife crisis. I would call it just a come to Jesus moment. I was just kind of rudely awakened, the path that I was on, I was just kind of burning the candle at both ends sort of thing, and prioritizing everybody before myself. And I hit a real breaking point. And ever since then, I've just been realizing how the only thing I have control over is myself, and I've started really prioritizing all the different aspects of my health as a result. So like starting with my sleep, getting at least those 7-8 hours of sleep, exercising again consistently, keeping my intake, my food intake in check, like the types of things that I'm putting into my body. Regulating my nervous system, because when you have 2 kids and you're trying to run a business and having a successful marriage, like your nervous system will really get tested. Your capacity to hold things gets really tested. So I really I've been focusing on staying grounded in those moments when I'm being challenged, and a lot of like peripheral things around that too. I'm talking to a trainer now just to like really tighten things up, but there is definitely a correlation. Like this Aivvy 2.0 feels like Evan 2.0 as well, because I've been putting in the work, and maybe I'm not like where I know I could be. I'm celebrating where I am now, because that's really important. You have to celebrate those small wins, because they compound. If you're always just looking at like, how can I improve, and you're never really like checking in and acknowledging yourself for the work that you're putting in, you'll never feel successful, because you're always just kind of looking ahead. So I'm striking that balance of like celebrating what I've been doing, but also continuing to aspire to do more. And health is like integral in that, because again, I get to be a CEO that is a strong, grounded leader for his people, and and for his family and everything else that's important to me. And so like in order to do that, I have to keep choosing myself in the default world, not just like how I show up in the public space and as a business person. Like I want to win holistically in all areas of my life, and I think that is something that's different about me. I've also learned, like in business, there's some people that are ultra successful in business, but they suck at health, or their kids never see them, right? Or like, their marriage is falling apart. They're on their 3rd marriage or what have you. Like, I'm like, no, like I want to win in all areas. Maybe it's going to mean that it'll take longer for me to get there, but to me, that's the game. Like that to me is the life game, is to win in all areas, and to lead by example, to show people that like nothing has to fall off. Like you can be successful. It requires work, but to me, it's worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you mentioning the whole people looking ahead. Not only does it make me, think of people who, can't relax or anything, but also makes me think of, those are the same type of people that are essentially always comparing themselves to others. They see someone who, may have more, and they're like, okay, I got to go after it. Very, in a sense, it's like a nihilistic sort of, behavior. We're kind of surrounded by nihilism these days, where, people are only worried about, what they see. They kind of forget to, ground themselves in whatever way they can. If it's, thinking about it in like a religious sense, if you need that in your life to keep you grounded, or if you're more spiritual and you have ideas and beliefs that there is more to life than what we see around us. When it comes to winning in all areas, and maintaining the mindset and understanding that it even if it does take longer, it is absolutely worth it. And one thing it made me think of is just how in touch we are with things we shouldn't be in touch with. I mean, and I'm referencing social media, our phones and stuff like that. We were talking recently about how you've stepped back from consuming so much and just utilizing it for just the productive aspects of what you do with your life. What's that been like? How have you been managing not falling into the trap of scrolling and whatnot? Because that's a very important topic that I try to bring up in conversations these days, and it is currently sculpting everyone at every moment. Whoever if you're currently looking at Instagram, if you're currently looking on YouTube, if you're currently whatever you may be doing. And, it's not even, doing it right now, but just the habits of like, you just got off work and you just sit on the couch for an hour or two, just, like this. And how have you been managing?
Dude, I have a lot of thoughts around that. That's a very real thing that you're speaking to. It's very apt and timely. And I'm glad that you're asking these questions, because I do think we're at a like real inflection point right now with all that. I think we've, for a long time, people have, the government and institutions have tried to like influence, how we do things, even like since we first had radio, and then we had newspapers, and we had the news, and now social media is just another version of that. They're like, hey, wherever we can get in front of people and try to like influence them on how they live their lives, like to me it's a real like spiritual war. And as I shared, there's the things that I put in my body, like food, and there's social media and things are a version of that, right? It's like things that I'm consuming. I'm just as much as I've been getting clear on what I want, arguably it's been more a battle of eliminating the stuff that doesn't serve me. That's actually, it's been more, I would say the work has been more around that, if anything, like what don't I want, and like being vigilant in eliminating those things from my life. And social media and consumption is a big aspect of that. That mentor that I mentioned that really pushed me into entrepreneurship, she had a lot of, she was really tuned in on a lot of things. And one of the things that she taught me was like, in life, you're either enrolling or you're being enrolled, right? So I don't need to explain, like, but for people that don't know maybe what I mean by that, like, you're either being influenced or you're being the influence of something, right? And to me, it's also leadership. Like, you're a leader or you're a consumer or follower, which, listen, it's not a not. Like, it's perfectly fine to be a consumer. Sometimes I need to be a consumer, I just want to veg out and I want to watch something and be entertained. But it's just like, you have to have a balance. You can't just be like a consumer all the time. It's very gluttonous. There's a reason why it's one of the, the 7 deadly sins, right? Gluttony. So, it's about striking that balance. And I do think we're in a world where we're constantly trying to be enrolled into something. That's what I mean by you're either enrolling or you're being enrolled. And so, I would rather be on the other side of the coin. I want to be enrolling. And, and I'm a big Spider-Man fan, so we didn't even touch on Marvel. It's going to open up a whole can of worms. But like, when I first moved to this country, that same grandma that I mentioned, she would give me $1.25, which is amazing at the time you could get for $1.25, whole other tangent. And I would go to the comic book store, and just intuitively, I'm like, I like the Spider-Man guy. And I was just always obsessed with Spider-Man. And, his core tenet is like, with great power comes great responsibility. So it's like, as I continue to evolve as a leader, that is like one of my guiding principles. It's also like how I wield that power. So, I choose to be as best I can. I'm not perfect. I'm definitely messy, but I choose to be a good person and show up, in a way that is reflective. That like, you can have it all. You can be a good dad. You could be a great husband. You can be a business owner. You can be physically healthy, and and I like, it's such a loaded thing. Like, can we trust the institutions? Can we trust our government? Right? Everybody's in that question right now. And like, I think my solution to that is I do believe that people are inherently good. I just have to believe that. I think to even get into government, like, there's got to be something in you that like wants to create positive change. Like, I just don't. Because I myself have done government work, I've worked with people, and like, I know that part of me that's compelled to do that is because I want to create positive change. And even in, even in the judicial system, you hear, that society typically bends towards justice, right? Even if like it kind of oscillates, typically it leans towards justice, which to me, confirms my belief, which is that people are inherently good, and when they get into it, at least, it's usually with positive, changes in mind. Now, what happens with them along the way when they start getting influenced by big money and lobby, et cetera, like, that's a different story. but I like to believe that even the people that like oversee what we do are inherently good, even it, and the media again is going to highlight some of the worst aspects. So those are just some of my high level views on it. But there, we are fighting a spiritual war. Like if you kind of like, kind of look at it at an even more higher level view, I think that we're definitely fighting a spiritual war, and it shows up a lot of different ways. There's definitely still evils in the world, and again, that's why I just choose to be on the side of like justice and right, and and be do my best to be a reflection of that and lead by example and like create impact with the tools and the things that I have. Because I think the other thing too, especially like when you're younger, is like and you have those positive traits and you've had good values from your family, it's like, you want to do so much, and it can be, you could feel like you're not doing enough, but, you got to start from where you are. That's what I've had to kind of learn. It's like, what can I do with what's in front of me, versus like feeling like I'm never enough and like, I should be doing more or what have you. So like, each day I look at the wins, and sometimes they're micro and sometimes, they're macro. So I don't know how how do we get on this topic? What was the question?
We brought up there. No, you're good. I brought up social media consumption, and I mean, I so much to touch on with what you said. We could go on for hours. One thing that I was thinking of while you were talking was when you said you're either being influenced or you are the influencer, and that sort of makes me think of those who it just, you see what goes on in today's day and age, and with how much we're able to consume is a lot more, it's an unnatural amount, arguably. And not only does it come with like you looking at your phone or looking at your computer, but also the ability of others to come in contact with you, because you just receive so many forms of communication that are I don't want to use the term malicious, but you have just these people that just want to sell you something that just they're not into genuine connection per se. Maybe just not as a part of their job. Maybe they have genuine connections outside of work. But I mean, it's hard to really think about those who do work that involves being disingenuine and then going and living a life of that is genuine.
Yeah.
I see that being a huge sort of like contradiction to one's way of life.
And it is, and it's like a taking energy. That you're kind of reminding me what I was gonna say, that that's what I mean by spiritual war. There's like a taking energy in that, like they want to get something from you versus like contributing to the world. And like I said, sometimes you need to just take and consume, like it's hard to just be always like a good person and always in contribution, because eventually you can get burned out. Like, you do need to just kind of like receive too. But there's a big distinction between receiving and taking. And exactly, a lot of the stuff that we get marketed, it's people that are just trying to take. Right. I can't say that that's like a receiving energy. It's a taking energy, man. And that's what I mean. Like a lot of my day is spent doing battle and eliminating and shielding my family from all the takers constantly. Like I'm getting emails all the time. People come into the door all the time trying to like get something from us, trying to get our money, trying to sell us on something. The government is trying to, lead me in a certain direction or vote for a certain someone. And, you have to be really discerning, and you have to really be grounded in like who you are, so that you can just be kind of decisive with like what you will and won't allow into your life. And honestly, that's a lot of my role as like a husband and as a dad. It's just like shielding them from a lot of that stuff.
Right. No, yeah, I mean, like on my way to the airport yesterday, Leah got a call from a random number, someone trying to someone trying to get my dad's company to like do advertisings, and it's like
I realize like that's probably like over half the calls they get is like someone else trying to get my dad to buy something when my dad's over here trying to, bust his behind, making sure that he reels in money for his family, and it's, really thankful for, just it makes me reflect on when COVID happened and my dad's business boomed. Like everyone needed some work because most of the general sort of electrical trade worker, I guess, that a lot of people rely on were just not working because of the regulations and stuff. And it just makes me reflect on my dad's work ethic and just him always being he always mentioned, making money in Islam they call the halal way, the way that it's, you're not making money that's, against, the law or that's coming from like, doing something terrible per se. So yeah, I mean that's in this world where you see people and they're winning in the sense of maybe how much money they have, how much what did it take for them to get that way? It clearly costed them stuff like like you mentioned, family, bad relationships or no relationships at all, health. You see most these people in high positions, most executive boards, most people who are directors and senior vice presidents and most CEOs. They're either overweight or they are hunched back like no other, and it's crazy. It's crazy that. And I don't mean to go off on a tangent either. I was ranting the other day about why we have 84-year-olds in power, and it just makes me think like I wish we talk about the youth and how powerful the youth are, and I just wish they would not they as in like it'd just be nice to see a little more action being taken, a little more
Well, I agree with you, man. I mean, I think that is you're touching on something that's really, really apt and again timely. Like we are at this stage where like I think the reason why we keep being in this loop of like having these 80-plus-year-olds like in government is because like it's entrenched, so like they've. I don't want to get into the whole victim aspect of like, this is just like how it's always been and stuff. It's just like they're the ones that are willing to step up and do those jobs. I do think that that there is a big gap between that older generation and the younger generation, which I feel like I'm kind of like on the cusp, and I kind of feel like a bridge, to be honest with you, like between the old school and the new, but I think there's just not a lot of young people, unfortunately, that have been willing to step up into those positions, or at least not yet. I do think that, we are developing ourselves into the types of people, that are going to step in and take over. But like those old, I don't want to call them old fossils, but they're, like it's not about them. It's about the logic, right? It's not about like them and their age. It's just about, it's the old ways that die hard. There's a reason why that term exists. So, I think that's what we're seeing a lot of right now, and it's playing out, in our government and other places. There's a lot of like the old ways of thinking and doing things. They don't want to just like, they want to go out kind of kicking and screaming. This has happened throughout society where they don't believe, or they see younger people doing things in a different way, and it scares them, and it's totally understandable, because they've come to live life in a certain way and they've gotten comfortable with things being a certain way. And, young people inherently bring change and a more progressive sort of mindset. But 9 times out of 10, not even 9, inevitably the change comes, right? Because that's just part of human nature as evolution. Like you have to evolve, you have to allow things to kind of die off and bring in new concepts and things. And again, because I am an optimist, and I do believe that life moves towards justice, like that it's gonna be all good. Like it's always been all good. Like this dynamic of old and new has been around since the beginning of time. And look, we are very resilient people. We are still here. We are, objectively, we are thriving. Like, despite what the media and everybody wants to tell us, like, we are thriving. Like, look how much we have access to healthcare. We are more interconnected than ever before. We have more resources than ever before. We look at it. You can order something right now and it'll be at your door the same day. Like, we're able to spend more time. Like, yes, it all requires work, but it's available to us. So to me, it's like this is the best time, objectively, and unfortunately, the news and other sources, they just want to focus on the negative because that's just like what gets the clicks. Right. So to kind of loop it back, I think I really challenge and I encourage, the younger generations to keep finding those opportunities, to speak up, to step up into government, like find what, again, meeting yourself where you're at. You got to start from where you are and like what is in front of you, but like continue to to find opportunities to be in contribution, to leave the world better than you found it. That's a big thing of mine, is like just leave the world better than you found it. I think a lot of people want to, like, again, change the world, and it's like if you could just work every day to do it, to leaving it better than you found it, like that's a very attainable and realistic goal, and you can feel good at the end of the day that you did that. So just like be objective with the things that you commit to, and celebrate your victories no matter how small. And so, like I said, like find opportunities to be in contribution. For me, we're right now, we're in my community center here in Austin, and the way that I've been giving back is I stepped up into a leadership role here when I first moved here. They had like this like kind of mastermind group of leaders in the community, and we all work towards like how can we improve the community, what are things that we hope to see of it in the next 5 years. When they would submit like a survey for how can we improve things, I would like give them my feedback. I check in with some of the heads of like this organization that keeps this place tidy, and I would be like, hey, we need to improve the internet, we need to, like, people are complaining that like this place is busy or what have you, like, so I actively work in the community. And then like through my business, I satisfy a big part of my why, because I'm helping leaders. I'm giving them a jump off point. My overarching company is actually Leaders to Launch. So Aivvy is like our first product. So a lot of people don't know that.
Okay.
And why it's Leaders to Launch is because that's just what I've done over the course of my life, is like I've realized that I'm the guy that helps them get up off the ground. I'm not necessarily the guy that's there, on the tail end. I'm the guy that's like, let me sit down with you, let me get clear on who you are and what your goals and aspirations are, and let me equip you with all the tools and knowledge and everything that you need to just like give you a kickstart, and then you can go and run with it. And then obviously I'm still there if they need me, but like that's my strength, is like I just want to be there for as many of those jump off points as I can. And Aivvy is one of the vehicles for that, because I'm literally like equipping them with the tools and technology and mindset to just like be a successful leader. Leaders to Launch. So and then obviously like it permutates so much of what I do. Like my wife and I'm actively just working with her and collaborating with her on just being a source of good vibes and like a lot of the values like that she grew up with too, like and her background and her religion, and my background and my religion, and then our kids, and making sure we're instilling them with all those values, and we're teaching them to be good people and also be a source of like high vibration. So it really that's to me is the game.
I mean, the thing you said, it's good, it will be good, just the times and life, and how arguably these days, with just simple things like plumbing and having a shower, and we can argue about what certain things are good for you, what certain things are bad for you, but the fact that we do have access to food, even if it is gone through like certain processes, like more people are alive because of where humanity has led us today. If it wasn't like that, then there wouldn't be humanity per se, or like there wouldn't continue humanity wouldn't continue per se. And and yeah, I mean, a lot of it, I think one of the roots to that, like you were mentioning, is, being communal. It's not about, you throw your phone away. Everything about that is, gone, and it won't matter. Like what will matter at that point is, you being here right now, taking your children to school, going to the grocery store, getting your food, going to work, so you can, pay the bills to keep the roof over your head. And really, you can live life, I think, without the Instagrams and the TikToks and stuff like that. Because, I mean, you literally, if you unsubscribe from all your favorite influencers, it's like they don't even exist. They don't actually have influence over your actual life. Grocery stores do. The people who own the grocery stores, the people who build houses, who built your house, the people who run the not the entire the education system. That's a whole other tangent we can talk about. But the people that give their time to helping raise the children and the adolescents, because it does take a village to raise a child, regardless 100%. Of where you're at. I kind of to segue into the last thing I want to talk about is things that make the times good per se. I think a big attribute to that is stuff like Marvel. How much can you credit Marvel to just your life, and how much it's sort of I don't want to use the word influence, but I mean it is very influential stuff. You do I've learned so much from the movies and the TV shows per se, and as cliche, or as however you want to put it, it's there is a lot to be learned from just these stories that are created by people who have lived lives and who have been around the world. It's just because it's not something that's been around for over 3,000 years in the form of like a religious text doesn't mean that these things aren't on par with being as influential. Arguably, Marvel is way more influential than any sort of influencer that we follow.
Oh, it's massive.
Yeah, it's insane. And I mean, I can definitely say they've been the entertainment pieces, I mean, literally like the Daredevil and Jessica Jones and Iron Fist and Luke Cage. Those shows inspired me to actually take the step into training martial arts. I've always thought about it. I've always seen myself as a fighter. I've always thought that I'm a strong individual that can overcome a lot of adversity. I just never actually taken the time to train and whatnot. And it wasn't until I started watching those shows and I was like, I'm gonna do it now. I mean, because there was nothing they were doing that I couldn't do. Obviously it was all sketched out and whatnot, but like a lot of those moves are real martial arts moves, are real combat moves, and it's so yeah.
Well, and I know we're as much as we could keep talking, we'll probably have wind it down for the sake of the viewers. So firstly, 100%. I mean, you cannot downplay Marvel's influence. Firstly, I think a lot of people don't know. I mean, they've been around since the 1950s, 1940s, and they've always been a cultural phenomenon. And I mean, look at even present day. When you have Spider-Man beating out Odyssey, Christopher Nolan, right, biggest director of this generation, biggest movie, biggest budget. Spider-Man beat it out. That should just tell you everything you need to know. It just shows how much people resonate. Resonance is a really big word for me. Resonate. That's what people are seeking. They want that resonance. They want to feel something. They're tired. Yeah, they're tired of the jargon and the corporate slop and the man-made BS. They just want to feel because that's life. That the whole point of life is to feel and feel everything. And so obviously I'm a huge fan and proponent of Marvel. Like I said, I've been into it since a kid, and that was just an intuitive thing. I literally was just walking in the streets of New York and found a comic book shop and would and there's countless books in there, and I'm like, what is this? Who is this Spider-Man guy? So even back then, I just he really resonated with me. And then I remember my dad got me like a year-long subscription, which was like the best thing ever. So I would get like every issue every month, which was amazing. And I was there during like when they introduced, like, it was one of the they had already introduced Venom at the time, but they brought him back, and then they taught you who Carnage was. Like, I was there for that whole ride, which was like amazing. And to see where it is now is just like, it's incredible. And I'm like, and we were just talking about this last night, how like, and I feel they're hitting this nice like kind of stride again now, with starting with Spider-Man. And even Thunderbolts I thought was good, and Fantastic Four was good, but Spider-Man I was like, okay, now we're starting to crank it up, so I'm excited for what's coming. But think about it, man. Like, they, I think why people love them is because like it's the justice thing. Like, they are all fighting for justice, and Spider-Man to me is just such a tragic but like relatable character, because he stands for justice. Great power comes great responsibility. He had such an impactful life lesson, when his uncle died, and he got that, and it's like, been influencing him ever since. But it's very tragic because he's Spider-Man. He's constantly getting attacked by these villains. Oftentimes he's responsible for the villains even existing. Yeah. They're always coming after his family. He doesn't want to do it. He's what I like to call a reluctant superhero, but he chooses to do it anyway because of his willingness to, for justice and doing what's right. And what I love about him, and I'm like kind of retracing the steps now, how they've been telling his story in this last phase. Like, it's actually like, it's really kind of beautiful, because even, when Tony Stark is like, hey, like, I can keep equipping you with the technology, you could be an Avenger. He's like, I kind of just want to focus on New York. Like, I love that, because that's kind of what I'm speaking to. You know what I mean? Like, you got to start with where you are, and impact can look a lot of different ways, and it can be on the ground level. And that's what I love about this latest movie. I'm not going to give anything away, but it's really feels like ground level for the first time, right? It's a proper Spider-Man New York story. So I'm just excited about where they're going to take that, and it really feels like this coming of age thing with him, right now. And but yeah, man, I mean, look, Marvel, think about it. Like, they introduced Black Panther, I want to say 1950, 1960, like a true black superhero. And like, they've always been doing the diversity piece. They've always been showing, singing the high praises of being unique, looking different, and everybody has something to contribute to the whole. And there's these, these beautiful arcs along the way with like Secret Wars and things, which we're gonna see here soon. Yeah. I hope everybody's getting excited about that, because it's, it's like when they can all kind of come together to create something even bigger than themselves, right? But look, Black Panther's got Wakanda, Peter's got, New York. So it's like, I really believe that. I think you gotta create impact where you are, and of course, if we can also like come together, we can do something bigger than ourselves too, right? Bigger than we would have been able to do on our own. So that is like my, that is the heed my call. Like, that is my like encouragement, to all the generations, is to really, start where you are, create impact, give it your all every day, leave the world better than you found it. The other thing that, guides me too is the concept of like, planting trees that you may never reap the shade of. It sounds like a little morbid, but like, I believe that. Like, literally, I'm growing trees in our house right now, and I'm like, hey, we may not live here inevitably, but like, someone is gonna benefit from these trees. And, like, I would hope more and more people have that mentality and, that way of looking at things. To me, because what's underneath that is like just doing something that's bigger than yourself. Ego is one of those spiritual things that we fight against, and like, it's gonna always kind of creep its head back in. But like, the more you can, stay objective, think of some, think in terms of like, what can I do that's bigger than me, and a mission and like and a passion and like a, something that you strive for is like a great way to do that, whether it's a business or, stepping into like teaching kids jujitsu, right? Something that is like bigger than you, or like working with people that can do something bigger than you would have been able to do alone, is a great way to get out of your own way and like work towards something that is really fulfilling. I think a lot of us are seeking fulfillment, that resonance, that feeling of like, oh, like I gave it my all today. Like, you can do that every day. You can have that every day, like, I think you just gotta like I said, take a step back, take inventory, continue to just like, you know, check in with yourself and what do you like, what you don't like. And a lot of that, like you said, is it just comes with time, you know, like you just got to try different stuff and you'll learn in the process of like what you like and what you don't like. But, you know, what you got to try to abstain from doing is, like we talked about, you got to abstain from just sitting around and consuming and like not taking action. And, you know, there's a real like, again, we're at this inflection point where like, you know, the potential is for you to just go further into consumption and living a sedentary lifestyle and getting fat and like not doing anything with yourself and depressed and, you know, possibly dying at a, you know, younger than you should have, or, you know, working each day towards something. And like I said, it's going to look different for everyone, you know, so that's my kind of parting thoughts.
Yeah, no, beautifully said. You know, especially regarding, you know, you will definitely plant trees that you will not reap the shade of. That's just, that's reality. If you want to make true impact, you have to be comfortable with, you know, knowing that you are contributing to the bigger picture. Even if you know, you're not given, you know, the credit that, you know, you want in that moment. It doesn't matter. Like the bigger picture is, you know, you should feel, you know, fulfilled because you did contribute to the bigger picture. And I mean, very poetic that, you know, Spidey is, you know, who you go to because you were in New York. So it's almost like, you know, that was, you know, meant to be almost. But man, thanks for, you know, doing this. It was a great, you know, great conversation. Where can people find you?
Well, Aivvy.com is, we're about to do Aivvy 2.0, so AIVVY.com. So check that out. That is about to launch. All my handles are Evan Karadimov, EVAN, I'm sure you'll probably link those. So, you know, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, LinkedIn. I will say I'm not super active on those platforms, but I will probably start ramping it up here soon, especially LinkedIn, because it's where a lot of my customers are going to hang out. But, you know, I'm definitely reachable if people want to reach me, and I have a feeling I'm going to be doing more of this type of work. You know, I've been kind of, like I said, I've been taking a step back for a while, but I feel like the time is now coming where like I got to put myself back out there, and I have a message to tell. Like we had a, you know, we could have kept talking today. So, but, you know, I wanted to say one thing on what you just shared, like, you know, the giving without having expectations, absolutely. And life has just a way of reciprocating. You just got to trust that, you know, whether you want to believe in God or spirit or whatever. Like, I don't think there's any one way, but like, it just has a way of reciprocating, and you just got to trust that and like not be attached to what that looks like. Because, you know, how it shows up may very well look completely different from what you expected. So, you know, having that kind of level of detachment from the outcome, but continue to do those things, you know, with the belief that it will pay off, because it will.
Absolutely, absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, Evan Karadimov. Thank you so much.
Wow, brother, thanks for setting this up, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
We'll see you guys soon.
Bye, everyone. Hey, everyone. Thanks again for watching. It means a lot. Don't forget again to subscribe, like, dislike, leave a positive comment, leave a negative comment. I don't care. Thanks again for watching. We'll catch you next time.